Welcome to the Healthy Heart Show, where we pull back the curtain on conventional medicine and dive into the root causes of cardiovascular health. If you are concerned about high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart attacks, stroke, or atrial fibrillation, this is the place for you. We will provide natural heart information that will help you prevent, treat, and reverse any ailment, leaving pills and procedures out of the picture. Here are your guides to holistic heart health, board-certified cardiologist and Amazon best-selling author, Dr. Jack Wolfson, and natural heart doctor, naturopathic physician, Dr. Lauren Lattanza. Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Healthy Heart Show. I'm your host today, Dr. Lauren Lattanza, naturopathic physician here at Natural Heart Doctor, your home for the 100-year heart. As always, we are looking to get you guests from around the globe to bringing everybody to their 100-year heart. That is sound mind, sound body, and all of the organs that fill that vessel up. So welcome to the show. We've got an amazing guest for you today. We have Erin Alexander. Erin is a pioneering manual therapist and movement coach, founder and creator of the Align Method, author of the Align Method book, and host of the amazing The Align podcast. He has worked with some of the world's greatest professional athletes, performers, celebrities, and everyone in between to relieve pain while creating greater strength, flexibility, and ease in their mind and body. After working with thousands of clients and spending years backpacking around the world, being immersed in various cultures, he has come to the conclusion that the healthiest people are not gym rats. Instead, they naturally integrate the foundational principles aligned in the Align Method to strengthen their bodies, balance their minds, and activate their innate systems of healing in daily life. Erin has simplified ancient techniques for cultivating vitality and assimilated them into modernized, simplified, and movement-based principles for you to easily integrate into any situation throughout your day. When you do, every movement becomes an opportunity to develop greater strength, flexibility, and confidence to truly step into your physical potential and drop the baggage of pain and limitation. Welcome to the show, Erin. Thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
Dr. Lauren, reading the description off the website, all my sphincters were deeply clenched through the entirety of that experience.
Do I need to update anything? Do I need to delete anything?
I'm like, when did I write that? And who wrote that exactly? I think there was like a little editor action. There was like, I'm like, okay, cool. I think that's about appropriate.
I think it's all pretty great things. I mean, so you're very well represented, sir.
Oh, good. That's great. I appreciate it. My sphincters are slowly, all of my diaphragms are subtly descending.
How's that for mind body
down towards the pillow.
Huh?
Right. Perfect integration. What a wonderful somatic experience that was. Thank you, Lauren.
Well, hey, I think that that's a pretty intriguing bio. So we're very lucky to have you here. And I mean, all of these things, we were talking a little bit before we hit record on all of the things that you do. I mean, with the manual therapies and everything that you integrate and kind of bring back home and bring to everybody kind of feeling better. So I really wanted to hone in, like I was just mentioning, about the mind-body relationship. So what does it mean? So we kind of hear a lot about this maybe, but what does it mean to have a well-developed connection between your mind and body?
I love that question. I don't really have an answer, but I think it was interesting as you were talking in the beginning, discussing your guys's kind of like mantras of who you are and what you are and the podcast and what you represent and such, and talking about the organs inside the body. You didn't say exactly like that, but it was something like the organs inside. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting idea that the organs are inside. And then you have to, it begs the question of like, where is inside? Right. Where is outside? The skin certainly is an organ. Mm-hmm. The skin from a embryological perspective is derived from the same dermal layer as the brain, neurological tissue. Mm-hmm. So the ectoderm. So the idea of my brain existing in a vacuum and my, eye existing between my ears, all of that is story. So then you say, okay, well, maybe there's a gut-brain relationship. Seems like everyone agrees with that. Your gut's like the cat brain, millions of neurons interlaced throughout it. You have a gut feeling. It's like, oh my God, I think there's something to that. I'm actually like kind of thinking with my viscera. And you say, okay, well, cool, agreement. Culture decides there's a gut-brain connection. Well, then there's also this skin-brain connection so all of this information is coming back from, the way that you're receiving feedback of your feet against the ground, temperature of the air, is there a breeze, and then your olfactory system and your auditory system. And then, and then it's like empathy, you walk into a room and you notice a vibe. Mm-hmm. You walk in, it's like, and if that word's too out there for some people, which is completely fine. I respect people that have resistance around words like that.
The anti-vibers.
Anti-vibers. That's completely great. I have a lot of that in my own self, but where that becomes very apparent, say you walk down an alleyway and you get the indication that there's a chance that there's a threat here. Mm-hmm. That's a vibe, right? Like, okay, there's something about this. I don't really know what it is, but I walked into this room and the way that my sphincters were all clenched up as you're reading my bio, I'm kind of having a similar sensation. Suddenly I'm feeling blood pulling out of my viscera into my appendages, getting ready to fight or flight, or, I'm starting to feel my heart rate starting to go up. I'm starting to feel my breathing patterns start to come up into my clavicular territory, my chest and my upper lobes and my lungs. And it's like, wow, interesting. So I walked into a room and suddenly my whole entire physiology matched the space or match the container that I was existing in there. Mm-hmm. And so then it's like, okay, cool. Gut brain connection, skin brain connection. Is there like a room brain connection? Is there like a person to person connection? Because when I'm with someone, I'm attuning to their facial gestures. We're attuning, it's like, I think this is accurate. The girls tend to menstruate together based off of who's like the perceived alpha.
Yes.
Yeah. So based off of who's the perceived alpha, so you can have like competitions with your gal friends. So I don't think I answered anything, but I think kind of sort of I did a little bit.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, a good way to kind of look at holistic medicine. And that's why I always say, like, people come into my office and we'll talk about how they've got high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, and they're a cardiac patient. But we know that it's so much more. You're not just a cardiac patient, you're a whole person. So we got to take into account the entire person. And that's, I think, why we say, holistic. It's not, you're a whole person. So it's the heart connection, the gut brain connection. And we know that all healing belongs in the gut, or starts in the gut. So we got to look at all avenues. So I think you, in a roundabout way, answered my question.
But that is a story and an idea and a potential tunnel to have the concept that all healing begins in the gut, which I don't disagree with, mm-hmm. but it is an interesting thing to pick apart.
Yeah.
Because you could also say all healing perhaps could begin with the choice to start to take care of your gut.
Right.
So if you don't have the motivation to start to invest in maybe getting like some kind of fecal test,
yeah,
I would see like, what are the bugs that are existing in my gut in the first place, or, paying money to seek out a naturopathic doctor, or investing in organic groceries, or understanding prebiotic fiber, and, or all of the different things that could be supporting my gut biome. Like, so there's a motivation piece in there as well. And then by starting to actually give yourself the raw components for your body to function well, that feeds back into the motivation. Where does it start?
Yeah.
I think it's just an interesting, we were talking about before about like philosophy and psychology stuff. I just think it's an interesting, most of these questions, if you go into them enough, it just becomes like this circuitous kind of conversation where we're like, head scratching, like, oh yeah. And then it's like, well, maybe it doesn't matter where it starts. All that matters is that, I think that we just start to begin paying attention.
Right.
That process of beginning to pay attention opens, I think that starts to open the doors up. Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing that modernity, I'm just ranting at this point, so I apologize if this is getting tiring. But modernity, a massive part of, I think that maybe the sickness and the disease that we're experiencing, it's at least happening congruently with our attention being pulled away from, I don't know, things that matter. Most of our attention's driving towards notifications in our cell phone, or backed up emails, or advertisements. We're exposed to millions of advertisements by the time we're 25, 30, like there's a lot of advertisements all the time. Oh, yeah. So our attention, like that is a commodity. It's being pulled out. So I think it's just a really interesting conversation of like, where is my attention?
Yeah. Yeah. And where you pay your attention, I think that that's a great figure of speech. You're paying your attention, you're investing into it. And so if you divert your mind somewhere else, you get, like I said, kind of you get your mind right. You got to start there and then breeding more good habits. And you kind of get into this snowball effect of healing and a healthful lifestyle and kind of snowballing. Okay, maybe the people around me are a little bit toxic. Maybe turning on the news in the morning is a little bit toxic. So kind of just making one decision, like my mom always said, life is a series of choices. So you make one choice and then you're like, oh, that was a good one. I feel better because of that one. And then you are more likely to make another beneficial choice.
But to know that people are toxic or foods are toxic, it takes self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And then also, and this is going to get ridiculous, I'll come back to just like, measurable, quantifiable facts and information, but also the perception that the world outside of you is toxic. There is a good chance that that is a projection. And in fact, you are experiencing your own toxicity and projecting it onto other people, because there is a possibility and availability to see the love and the light and the God and all of the things in every being.
Yeah.
And so I think there can be, again, it's like a lot of like, yes, and it's very rare when there's an absolute statement of like, oh, your friends are toxic. It's like, well, yes. And you created your friends essentially, and there is the availability for you to feel resourced and stable enough in yourself that it doesn't really matter the people that you're exposed to, or if you walk through a mall or you're listening to a certain type of music, because you're so well oriented and you're resourced enough to not get knocked off course.
Yeah.
All right. Back to facts.
Okay. So I think that's a great segue for my next question. Are there ways to test your mind-body connection, your mind-body relationship?
Yeah, I think so. One thing that I think is an interesting thing is just coming into, some people have blank spots all throughout their body. So even like if you just think about it right now, start to go through and have like a visual exploration of what it feels like to have a spine, for example. Can you go in and actually feel like if you were drawing a picture of your spine, of your back, of your shoulder blades, of your lower back, of your lower ribs, of your sacrum, like who the heck knows what the shape of a pelvis is? Like we're so detached from and you don't even need to know per se, but just going through and having a moment of, and starting to observe like, how does my back feel right now? Does it feel light? Does it feel dense? Does it feel painful? So that's the beginning of having that conversation, just drawing out of like an awareness, like, yeah, how am I? And going through and, if you're sitting, maybe you could sit, if you are sitting on the ground or on a chair, a helpful suggestion to avoid the sensation of it just being like, oh, I feel like collapsed and in pain, would be making sure that your hips are up above the height of your knees. Mm-hmm. So by bringing your hips up above the height of your knees, it's going to stabilize your pelvis and your lower back, the bottom vertebra, L5, S1 in particular. They're more in the shape of a wedge, with the wide end of the wedge facing towards your abdomen, so facing forward. So when you are sitting with your hips up above the height of the knees, this is like a very important, postural hack. It's not really a hack. It's just like engineering, mechanics, physics. But so by operating from that position with regularity, it's going to set your spine up for stability and for support. Mm-hmm. And so get your hips up above the height of your knees, get yourself on a cushion. If you're on a chair, raise the chair up. If you are on a chair for a while, get yourself some compression socks, go for walks regularly, get the heck out of the chair. Mm-hmm. And then while you're in that position, just start to notice the pressure of your feet against the ground. If you're on the ground, notice the pressure of your calves against the ground or your shins against the ground, and go through. I have this in my book, The Align Method. I have an exercise for people where you go through and you describe the qualitative experience. What are the adjectives or the qualities of each of your major joints? So going through and saying like, how would I describe my ankles? Do they feel smooth? Do they feel fluid? Do they feel fast? Do they feel dense? Do they feel rigid? Do they feel stuck? Yeah. Right? Do going up and doing the same thing with your knees? Do they feel clunky? Do they feel expansive? Do they feel spacious? Doing the same thing with your hips. If you're sensitive enough with yourself, you could say the same thing with your pelvic floor. Mm-hmm. Say the same thing with your diaphragm, depending upon what your awareness of what's happening in your body is. You'd say that with your shoulders, with your spine, with your wrists, with your elbows, with your neck. And just going through and having like a little audit of like, what is this physical experience for me? And then from there, a next level could be like, what would be my ideal descriptors of myself and my body? Mm-hmm. Like how would I want to feel? Because what you'll see if you do that, and I highly recommend people doing this if you have the availability to try something new, because I doubt too many people have done that. Write out those descriptors and then have that list and see how closely that list pertains or relates to how you feel as a whole. Mm-hmm. And your personality and who you show up in relationships and in business and just life, how you wake up in the morning. So what you'll find very consistently is it kind of describes you. Wow. It's kind of an interesting thing to start to like,
interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be crunchy and clunky. If you can be smooth and eloquent, I think that those are all better adjectives to strive for in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having kind of, like you said, kind of taking an inventory about your body and having a better understanding and awareness of maybe where you currently are versus where you'd like to be. And you don't have to be, a kinesiology major to understand. You don't need to know all the names of the joints, but to understand we've all got these components and how do they work? How do they work for you or against you? What are some ways that we can, would that be kind of like, in meditation, sometimes it's like from the top down, you're kind of taking in the awareness of all of your body and maybe your posture.
Yeah. So meditation, there's a lot of different types of meditation. I'm not a meditation expert by any means, but I've done, I don't know, I meditate regularly. I've done Vipassana, which is you just sit and pretty much meditate for 10 days. You get up at like 4:30 in the morning and you do these hour-long sits. And then you go and you take a break, you walk around, they have like a little rock path, you walk around for a while, then you come back and do another hour-long sit. You pretty much just do that in succession for 10 days. And I'm not boasting about that.
Doesn't make you a meditation expert?
Definitely not. No, definitely not. It makes you realize, just like how weak you are, or how weak I am. But so in that time frame, though, there was, I guess, more availability to kind of explore, like, what is this like meditation thing, and what meditation provides. I think there's a lot of confusion around what meditation is, and I think that a way that we can make it kind of more simplified is almost like gamifying meditation. And that's the way that I describe it, especially if I'm talking to like men like we want to like compete and have games and things of the sort. Right. So a very typical style of meditation would be following your breath, fancy term that sounds ancient, be calling that anapanasati, essentially just means, paying your attention to your breath. And in that time, what you're doing is you're allowing your mind to be distracted, like it is all the time. Like your mind, wherever your mind exists, depending upon what culture you're from, would determine where your mind is. But your mind, it's like this like thought juicing machine. It's just like thought. It just keeps on coming. It just keeps on rolling out, which is great and fine. The quandary comes when you buy the belief that those thoughts that are coming out is the entirety of who you are. Mm-hmm. And those thoughts consume your identity, as opposed to just being like, these thoughts could be just stuff that I've subliminally picked up when I did go to the mall, or when I did hang out with this person, place, thing, or anything, the news cycle that's going on in the background. And now it's like, oh, it's coming through me, but I'm not the news cycle. Right. And so the practice of meditation can be this ongoing process of observing those thoughts, saying, oh, wow, interesting. There's another thought. Like, I love that. And then saying, okay, I'm going to come back to just noticing my breath. That's it. And it becomes kind of it can have the potential to become like a pretty like masculine bro competition thing of like, all right, I'm going to go 9 seconds Here we go. Like 9 seconds, just going to notice the breath. Here it is. I'm thinking about myself noticing the breath. All right, that was 2 seconds. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. 9 seconds. I got this. And most people, even if they've had the potential to win $1 million or whatever, it would not be possible for them to go, maybe even 10 seconds, but 20 seconds, 30 seconds without just having their mind entirely honed in on just one thing, which is like kind of like amazing and unbelievable in a way. And that's not like, I fall into that category. Most people, it's not like easy for me, but when you start to perceive it in that way, it can be kind of an interesting game in a way. Mm-hmm. And then I find that kind of an easier thing to do for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. And then what happens is you start off with the gamification, then eventually with time, typically after 10, 12, depending upon where your mind's at, you'll go through different layers and you kind of chunk down in a way. And suddenly your mind starts to come out of maybe like that prefrontal analytical space and it starts to go into like these deeper parts of your neurology or in your body and your experience. It's really an interesting thing. And what that does in relation to actually having any semblance of an answer to what you asked, what it does is it makes you less reactionary. Mm-hmm. And there's just endless research to suggest that the practice of meditation, one, it changes the structure and function of your brain. It reduces the gray matter around the amygdala, and increases the gray matter around the hippocampus, helps with memory, helps with optimism, helps with just like generally experiencing this sensation of, joy, optimism, kind of like life's going to be okay because I'm not drowning in somebody else's thoughts. And then we come that back into like, okay, what's this mind-body relationship? Well, if I'm afraid, or in some reactionary state, some fight, flight, freeze type state based off of the way that I feel or the way that I think, or I think what is happening, that causes me to have a neurochemical response. That causes me to have a hormonal response. It causes me me to have a musculoskeletal response. It causes me to change my breathing patterns, change my visual patterns. I become my thoughts. Yeah. And if you're at the whim of those thoughts, then you start to produce yourself based off of those guys. You're like dust in the wind of a modern, statistically sick culture. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
It is. Like you said, and we don't have to become our thoughts, but if we can be less reactive and kind of say, okay, well, that was, just something that kind of came and go, just kind of swat it away and kind of come back down to it. I know that, you can have things cross your mind and you're like, that's not me. That's not who I am. And actually just in church on Sunday, our pastor was saying, I saw this cat and my first instinct was, I'm going to kick that cat. And he said, no, I'm not. I'm not going to kick the cat, but you don't have to kick.
I have that thought all the time. Yeah. Small children always like, I wonder how far if I were to like a nice, strong football. No, I'm just joking. I don't have that. No, I have thought there's actually comedy skit that I heard. So I heard a comedy skit. I don't know who it was, but that was his joke was like how far I could kick a small child. And and I was like, of course you laugh because like, that's terrible. But I'm like kind of laughing. And then of course, the next time I see like a small child, I'm like, the question is posed in my mind. And I'm like, is that my mind? Is this my thoughts? Or is this comedy show that I saw 2 nights ago? Anyways.
Yeah, no, that was not my thought. That's not me. I'm just pass that one along.
No. Do you think about that when you're driving like near a bridge? Like, you ever have a thought of like, oh, I could just drive off this thing right now?
Or like, what if I sneezed and I sometimes like just jump?
Yeah. It's interesting. The human experience, like we are so incredibly fragile, yet we're like fragile, yet robust at the same time. Like we're like at any time, it blows my mind driving on highways and we're just in these murder machines driving 80 miles one way and 80 miles per hour the other way, which compounded that together. I don't know what that translates to, but a lot of energy smashing into each other. like inches away from each other. And this is just totally normal all the time. Like we're like just marginally close. We're like centimeters away from our own demise every day, multiple times throughout the day. Anyways, that doesn't really.
And it's just like completely normal. And then
totally normal.
And then we have patients that walk in with high blood pressure. I'm like, how far did you drive? How fast were you driving on the way here? I'll wait till the end of this appointment to take your blood pressure because you just showed up here in your murder machine. And that was totally a mundane task.
And then I wonder your thoughts on this, actually. Blood pressure, there's tons of research around this as well. I think there's particularly some studies done. I think it was in Japan, some university in Japan. I got this from Aubrey Marcus in his book, Own the Day. And he references a lot, but I believe what they suggested is just after 6 intentional breaths, I think it was deep breaths, you can completely change your blood pressure. Just after 6 breaths was like the minimum viable dose, which is such an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I had there's a guy that I was talking to just maybe it was 2 days ago, and he approached me, and I could tell he doesn't get a lot of sun. You could tell he's stressed. You can tell he's like anxious. You could tell his sleep wasn't ideal. And he showed me this picture of his hands, and he knows that I'm into like whatever health stuff. He knows I have a book about health stuff. So he's like, maybe I can help. And his hands were getting like almost like blue. And he was, cutting circulation off from himself to his appendages. And he would go through these minor panic attacks. And so my suggestion to him was, one, start to regulate your breath. So are you breathing through your nose? And the answer is no, because he's congested in his nose and he's got some kind of deviated septum stuff. So I'm like, okay, so your breathing pattern from the drop, you're sending the indication to the rest of your physiology that you're in like 5th gear. You're nothing wrong with 5th gear, nothing wrong with the sympathetic response. It's just sending this. If it's all the time, it's like, oh, bro, we need to sort that out, because you're sending the signal to the entirety of your biology that you're under attack. Such a beautiful thing to have access to that gear. You want to know how to be under attack and respond and move, and run and fight or hide, whatever. But so that was the interesting thing. And then the next thing, so I gave him a couple exercises on how to start to clear his nasal passages. And then we did a couple things where we emphasized the exhalation. So as you're exhaling, you're going to be activating more that rest, digest, calming side of the nervous system. And then the other suggestion was activating the mammalian dive reflex. So get some cold water, and dropping your face into cold water. You can put your hands into cold water. You can put the bottom of your feet into cold water, and all of that sends the signal to your physiology to start to kind of put yourself into that parasympathetic calm side of the nervous system. You're able to actually hold your breath longer when you're exposed to water as well, which is interesting. But it calms down. Yeah. And so then he did that. And he came back to me just yesterday. I saw him again. And he said he was going through this thing, having a panic attack. And he just did that. He brought his breath in his nose. Yeah. He emphasized the exhalation. He got a little cold thing, put his head in the water, put his hands in the water. And it was like completely changed the whole scene.
And I've got, like we said, high blood pressure, but then, we've got patients that go into AFib episodes, and it's like, no, just use these vagal maneuvers to kind of tonify that parasympathetic response, right. Take back the driver's seat, slow the breathing, put the blood back to the periphery, kind of all of these things that will just switch the script. So we're not being chased by a bear in modern times. So, maybe you are, I don't know what goes on in Austin, Texas on a regular basis, but I think that we can kind of shift what's going on in our environment, shift what's going on in our mind, and take back that mind-body connection of deep breathing, slow the heart rate, get the blood vessels back dilated, drop the blood pressure, all of these things that we can take control of.
The Healthy Heart Show will be right back after we take this quick break to hear from our sponsor. Would you like to drink great tasting coffee that's also good for your heart health? Cardiology Coffee is your answer. This 5-star rated coffee is delicious. It's a gourmet coffee that begins with whole organic beans, hand-selected and carefully roasted. It's tested and certified to be free of pesticides, mold, and other toxins. Cardiology coffee is great for your heart, and you're going to love how it tastes. Order now online at cardiologycoffee.com. Now back to the Healthy Heart Show.
The irony is, if you actually are being chased with a bear, you probably don't even need any of this conversation because you're probably the healthiest person in the room.
Yeah, you're probably living off the grid somewhere, and you're just better off.
And the process of being chased by the bear is actually, you're in perfect symphony with your autonomic nervous system. When you have some response where, some sympathetic response, you're like, ah, your body's queuing you up to run.
Yeah.
So when you're plugged into your laptop and you're wigging out about something, or your cell phone and, girlfriend thing, boyfriend thing, work thing, money thing, I'm not good enough thing, comparison, all of the different plethora of possibilities. I'll be loved once I get that car that I can't afford, or whatever's happening for you. And your body's saying, okay, here's all the norepinephrines and the cortisols, and we're going to move the blood around for you to go, let's go. Right. And then you just sit there and kind of curl in. That's intensely stressful.
Yeah.
But if you actually have a real bear, or just you have access to the awareness that you can kind of move yourself through stress, right. And you say, man, I'm feeling stressed. Okay, cool. Maybe grab a jump rope, maybe go for a walk, walk this thing out. Mm-hmm. As you're walking, acknowledging that your visual muscles are also tied into your autonomic nervous system. And if you're focusing in that myopic vision, that's sending the indication that it's cool, there's a threat in the room. I'm gonna get into that fight flight. I'm gonna get done, executive function, get stuff done. You can start to draw yourself more into that parasympathetic, calm, rest, digest side of your nervous system by relaxing your eyes. Mm-hmm. So you take in the panorama, you take in the entirety of the room. Maybe you look up into the trees, you get some natural sunlight in your eyes. You emphasize a long exhalation. You say, even an audible exhalation, more of that vagal stuff, and then you're like, wow, it's just understanding that your body is you're engulfed by all of these physiological toggles. It's just levers everywhere. There's just levers. And we never got any education on how to even realize there are levers. And then from there, understand how to pull which ones when. Mm-hmm. And if you just allow yourself to be dust in the wind of modernity, it's not just stressful, but it's stressful and sedentary and stagnant. And stress and stagnancy, I think, translates to, all the things we don't want.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And when I, tell patients to track their blood pressure or what have you at home, I often say, turn off the news, put down your phone. If your sister stresses you out, don't call your sister before doing this. Go sit outside for a few minutes. All of these things, because it's like medicine, right? It's like taking a pharmaceutical to lower your blood pressure. If you take it immediately upon getting home, driving your car, sitting in traffic, having a stressful phone call, stressful interactions, relationships, indoor lighting, all of these different levers in your lifestyle that kind of switch on the high blood pressure, just repeating that example. But then if we can undo all of that, it's truly medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. Life is so cool.
It is. We just got to realize that we're the owners here. We need an owner's manual, but
we need that's like shameless plug. That's why I wrote the book that I wrote. 100%. That was the full function, was, working with clients for however long, but it was 12 years or so before starting the podcast. And then eventually wrote the book several years after that. But the thing that I noticed with clients was we could create amazing change, and the techniques that we're doing were effective. And I could teach people self-care techniques and how to, keep their bodies well oriented. But oftentimes what would happen is they would come back with the same hip issue or the same knee pain or the same back pain or the same neck thing. And it was just this back and forth thing, which I think so many practitioners of any sort are highly familiar with. And the thing that became the most interesting to me is like, okay, I have such a short amount of time with you. And so whatever change for us to put things back on course, like until this becomes who you are, like it's not going to stick. It needs to become, because you have these years, decades of momentum going in these directions. And the shape of your home is forming you into this. The shape of your office is forming into this. The shape of your travel situation. You could suggest that the shape of your mind, like your identity structure, who you think you are. Do you think you're a proud, boastful, strong person that, you really want to be seen? Which that's not, that can go into like a shadow side where it's too much. And now you're flaring your ribs out and you're pulling your shoulders back and you're putting undue stress in your lower spine. And, you're just like, you're dumping all that power through your abdomen as opposed to keeping that place stable. Yeah. Or do you feel like, oh, I don't want to be seen. I feel ashamed. I feel this like deep shame. I don't even know how to put my finger on it, but I don't feel like I deserve anything. I feel like I just feel like, yeah, I don't, it's like terrifying. The idea of being seen. Yeah. What does that do to your body? So you're probably, maybe that could be a potential beginning of some type of scoliotic pattern, some lateral deviation of the spine where you kind of cower the shoulder forward a little bit. Maybe you start to, then that's going to start to just immediately, if you rotate one shoulder over, kind of just like covering up your face. You don't want to really be like people to see your whole chest and your abdomen and your face and such. That's the beginning of what could potentially be this scoliotic pattern, and then an imbalance of the hips, and then maybe one of the knee drops in valgus. And it's like a hiding position. Right. I'm not saying that's the root of all musculoskeletal imbalances, but you can see this in real time. If you're afraid, we'd already talked about the effect of being afraid. Maybe you're going to clench your mandible. Maybe you're going to feel your shoulders raise up and your scalenes and your SCM and all that stuff's going to come back, and, if you're defensive, you're going to come into like a defensive posture. If you walk into your house and someone scares you and surprises you, how do you respond? You're probably going to put your hands up. You're probably going to curl your shoulders forward. So there's so many different doors to enter into the physical conversation. And it's just I just come back to being just like spellbound by how interesting the human creature is.
Yeah. And like you were saying with, analyzing how your joints operate, what does your posture and all of that say about who you are? Are you this incredibly defensive person? Are you this shy person? Kind of relating all of that to who you are in your daily interactions.
So what that related to with the book was coming through and saying, okay, like I want this change that we were able to create in, the hour that we spent together, where suddenly you have this mobility or freedom or spaciousness or strength, or you feel like, wow, like I feel like my body's just like, it's almost like I'm like floating in a way. Like I feel like light. Mm-hmm. I want that to be you. Like I want that to be the way that you come home. I want that to be the way that you relate with your spouse. I want that to be the way that you show up in a business meeting, the way that you take a call, and the way that we do that is we start to orient the mold that you exist in, being your environment, to start to create more of that, and so one really apparent example would be, and this sounds like almost ridiculous maybe for some people, but just spending more time on the ground throughout the day is major. Like that's where you come from, for eternity. Your body has been going up and down off of the ground with regularity. It's a human resting position. Mm-hmm. So being able to go through a full squat, being able to have the mobility in your hips to be able to maybe go into like a 90-90 position, be able to do a cross leg position, just hang out with a kid before they go to kindergarten. Yeah. Notice their resting positions. And it's not like hunter-gatherer tribes and ancestral cultures are just always moving and always arms up overhead and always sprinting. And, it's like they're resting a ton. Like the human organism is incredibly lazy. We conserve energy well. And so the way that you would do that is, as you're working, you're going to naturally say, what's the easiest way for me to get this work done? And so for the most part, you're probably going to pop a squat, kind of be in a resting position for a moment. You're going to it's going to open up the muscles around the pelvic floor. It's going to start to kind of decompress all the joints in your lower compartment, and then maybe if you, from there, you're like, okay, I'm going to come down and all the ground setting positions that I just described. And cultures that spend more time on the ground, the particular places that have been studied with this would be Northern Africa, Eastern Mediterranean, and Southeast Asia. But just any place, you just go any place where you notice people are on the ground more. Any kid, they have minimal to no incidence of osteoarthritis in the hips, very low incidence of that in the knees. That's like I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was like mid $30 billion industry in the United States, hip and knee replacements, which is just like, that's wild to live in a world where like, that's not just a natural human thing that your body just starts to just fall apart. And it's based off of us divorcing ourselves, of going through these natural, you'd say maybe tuning mechanisms, you could say maybe rehydration mechanisms. The way that we bring new fluid into joints and move the old fluid out of joints is through movement. Right. When you divorce yourself of a certain range of motion of movement, which naturally would manifest as a product of, just like I'm saying, just getting up and down off of the ground with some level of regularity, you start to build up these little dams, these places of tissue dehydration and density and like callus, like scar tissue. Yeah. And then from there, like what is disease in the body? Like for the most part, it's going to be, it's going to be inflammation. Mm-hmm. It's going to be stagnation. And I mean, there's your recipe. Right. So you have stagnation in a place. Just think of like your body essentially is this beautiful compilation of bags of water. You have your muscle bellies and the muscular septa in between. You have your organs that are essentially floating on each other. And this tensegrity network, you could say, it's this dynamic tension holding your bags of water together. So you're a walking pond, right? With little intersections in between, which are also aqueous. Yeah. And a pond, if you want a pond to be healthy, you keep water circulation. You have maybe like one of those burbling pump things. You might have build some beautiful waterfall in the corner. You might have a sprinkler. The second that the water pump shuts down, you have stagnation and you have the beginning of a diseased pond. That is your body. It's not like kind of like your body. That's your body. Yeah. And so thinking of all of the joints in your body, and this gets into like Eastern medicine, and like Chinese medicine and such, and like the nadis and the chakras. Every joint in your body is considered a minor chakra. This is by no means my depth at all. But it is interesting seeing the intersection of East and West, definitely. And essentially they're just places of density in the body. Mm-hmm. So all of your little knuckles and your toes, your ankle, your knee, and then the space in between those channels could be blood vessels, could be arteries, could be nerves, mm-hmm. could be these meridians. Mm-hmm. That's like the highway opens up, it goes straight, and then poof, comes into the pelvis. Oh, complexity. Okay, we got nerve ganglia, and there's a lot of stuff. If there's a backup in that space, then you're potentiating some issue to manifest. Right. If you keep the traffic moving, you don't have angry people in their cars. You don't have people starving in their cars. You don't have people having nervous breakdowns in their cars. It's just, no, we're cruising. And the human body is structured to maintain traffic flow based off of our ancestral movement patterns, which are very easy to integrate into a modern lifestyle. But if you follow the basic structural industrialized mold of, it's not okay to want to move, it's not okay to want to go outside, it's not okay to want to have natural sunlight, it's not okay to want to explore, you need to sit in that chair, focus on that book, focus on that screen, We're going to teach you how to pass this test. We're not going to teach you about learning. Mm-hmm. That stifles the human organism in a really incredible way. And then from there, they set you free into the world and say, cool, go make money. And you're like, holy crap. What a scenario to be this beautiful, magnificent organism that we're, this just complex array, this symphony of electricity and water and light and love, and come in and just like, it's like a prison. It doesn't need to be. But if you allow yourself to just be that and not make the choice to take care of yourself in a way that you were never taught, and listen to podcasts like this and, read books like the ones that you guys do and programs and, see someone that's like follow the vitality, I think is a really important thing. Yeah. Like just because someone is a doctor, just because someone is an author, just because someone has 1 million people on Instagram doesn't mean you need to listen to them. Right. When you meet someone and you're like, I don't know what it is, but like, I feel really good when I'm around you. Yeah. Like you're just like, you feel like light, you feel like stable, you feel flexible, you feel creative, you feel passionate. Like, what are you doing? What are you eating? Like, what's your lifestyle like? Can we just hang out?
Tell me more.
that is a doctor. Doctor means teacher. Mm-hmm. So if you're just a prescriber of stuff that you're being paid on the back end for, that's not a doctor. That's a businessman. And that's not to say all doctors are bad or all doctors are good. It's just coming back to the root origin of that is like, oh, I want to teach you to be well. Yeah. I want to teach you to understand how to operate this system. That's all.
I love it. I think that's a wonderful way to look at, is your doctor actually honoring the body and honoring what your body is supposed to be doing and how it's supposed to be operating? Or is it kind of working against nature and all its glory and all its beauty and saying, no, your body's doing this, and rather than further investigating, why is it doing that? Why is it showing you this? Just writing a script, right. Take this pain med, take this other pharmaceutical to suppress your heart rate, why don't we just look at why our body's doing this and kind of identify why that's our pattern? So I think that that's absolutely incredible, that people don't really consider that when they're going to, pay money for somebody's, healthcare and their input into how they should take care of their body. So you've got an aligned program coming up. So can you tell us about what that might entail?
The main promise in the program is to get any person that goes through it to regain access to be able to functionally get up and down off of the ground, eventually using no hands. Mm-hmm. So it comes off of, there's two promises. One is full functional shoulder, regaining full functional shoulder mobility, range of motion, and then being able to connect your shoulders to your hips. It's very important. So there's an interesting test that I'm sure you've heard of that I also included in the book called the sit rise test. Familiar with this guy? And it was published in the European Journal of Preventative Cardiology, I think is where it was published. And essentially what it suggests is that each point of contact that you need to press your hands down against the ground, your knees, or if you have a wobble, each point of contact reduces your or increases your likelihood of all-cause mortality, based off of the folks they had in there it was ages 51 to 80, I believe, and I think it was 6.3 years that they were doing the study. I apologize for the unnecessary specifics. And what they found in there was the people that could get up and down off of the ground they scored an 8 to a 10. So they either used 1 point or 2 points at the most. They were 6 times more likely to live during that time compared to the people that would score down at 0 to a 3. So if you had to use, 7 points in the up and down, then it's like, oh man, like your vitality is limited. Mm-hmm. Like we need to sort this out. And it's not to say that you can just hack this test and then suddenly your part stuff will be sorted out, or your immune stuff will be sorted out, or whatever it is. It's a general litmus test or heuristic to base like, okay, am I doing the things that I need to do to be able to maintain sovereignty and autonomy and circulation and health? Right. And if I'm not able to just get up and down off of the ground, it's like, oh, we need to address that like in a big way. That's one of the promises. So it's broken down to a 4-week thing. And then the other one would be recuperating full functional shoulder range of motion, which is, limited with so many people because most of our lives are in this medial rotation and protraction and elevation of the shoulder. It's kind of like this defensive, stressed shoulder girdle position. And then we've got the carpal tunnel and we've got this like claw thing happening with our arms, and it's not good. And so there's simple ways to unwind both of those patterns. And then the next big thing is being able to connect the shoulders to the hips. So a lot of our movement patterns are based, they're bilateral positions where we're kind of like a bench press or a squat. Both legs are kind of in the same position. And that position's fine. You can learn a lot of things from those positions, but there's not a lot of connection of the right shoulder to the left hip, left, and the right hip to the left shoulder. Like that, every time you walk or you run or you throw or you do really any judo, dancing, tango, like anything that really matters with your body that's actually like a physical, like life expression, it's all about that spiral connection, low left to high right. And it's going from the back hip to back shoulder, front hip to front shoulder. And so that's really the primary focus is. And it's just invaluable. Like every person in I don't think it's my opinion, I think it's a fact. Every person, their life will be dramatically improved if they have access to those ranges of motion. And if you're maintaining a lifestyle from there, where it's just like, oh, that's just who I am. Like the way that I live, it's like every day I'm just getting better. Like that's my hope for every person on the planet, really, to change the idea that as I get old, I just start to kind of fall apart. And, I start to have these limiting beliefs and, oh, I don't want to get hurt. And, oh man, I can't do that anymore. You start talking about like the people that have the story that if you think that you were at your best when you were like 18 playing football in high school, you have a very limited perception of your potential. Absolutely. And it's like, you should be, but you could be at your prime at 30, 40, 50. I think that as you get beyond into, 60, 70, 80, it's like, then we're starting to enter into more of those, like that yin fluidity, spaciousness, just really like, wow, like every move you've had your whole life to understand cultivating leverage and balance through your body through a wide array of positions. And that's the 130-year-old,
like Tai Chi and stuff.
Yeah, Tai Chi, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the 160-year-old Tai Chi guy in the park. They're just like, wow, like he moves nice.
Right. And it's the contralateral movement and it's very fluid and it's not rickety and looking like decay and death.
Yeah. So if you're 90 years old, you might not need to be PRing on a deadlift, but you can move well. Right. Like that's the promise. Awesome. And any idea outside of that is not accurate. It's a limited perspective that's broken. I think that part would be my opinion. And I think that most people, if you really feel into it, would be like, yeah, I think that's about right. Like we can keep moving better and better. But that's where it's like the whole longevity thing of I'm going to, freeze my brain and my body and come back in 200 years or whatever. I'm like, I think maybe there could be some space to observe your relationship to death in that scenario.
Do a little reflection on that.
Could be a little resistance there. Right. But as far as moving, I truly know you can move better and better and better and better and better and then die. Yeah. Like that's where my mind is at. And that's what we do in the program. That's it's the function of the book. And if people are interested in learning about that, we'll have a bunch of free resources for folks. And we have what is the URL? alignpodcast.com/healthyheart.
Awesome. Yes.
Yeah. So people can go and check out, and we'll give you a breakdowns of starting to cultivate that mobility through the shoulder, and starting to cultivate the ranges of motion necessary to get up and down off the ground effectively. Yeah. And even if you're like a, super strong athletic person, there's still immense value in this.
Yeah. And you can be flexible and be incredibly strong. But you have to move and you have to have that mobility. So, I mean, we talk about getting patients to their 100-year heart, having all of our listeners and followers getting to their 100-year heart, but what's the point of that if you can't move? So right. I would encourage all of our listeners, please go, if you haven't already, followed and subscribed to the podcast. So we're going to follow the Align podcast. I know that I'm going to subscribe and get set up for the Align program, because I've got some rickety shoulders and we can all use improvement in our movement. So grab Aaron's book. Can you, Aaron, give us a rundown of where we can find more about you, where we can find your book? Give us all the details.
Yeah. So the book's called The Align Method, and it's anywhere books are found. And then Align Podcast is the podcast that I host. And I've been doing that it'll be 7 years in a month in April. So that's been a journey and experience.
It's incredibly well done. I will just interject that I learn something every single time I listen.
Whoa, that's cool.
Truly love it.
I really appreciate that. It's so funny. I always feel, even now, I still feel like surprised and humbled and even a little bit like, I think there's a little bit of like insecurity or validation that comes up of like, oh, you actually listen. Yeah. Do you like it? Yes, that's the Align podcast. That's been a really massive, just learning experience. So I really like to it's like learning out loud. I borrowed that from a friend, but I really just enjoy the things that I'm really interested in. And I have just this endless thirst of sorts to understand what the heck is going on in this physical experience. And it's such a cool opportunity to get to bring the people that we have on there and to get to have, conversations in there. So the Align Method book, the Align podcast, social media, YouTube, Instagram, is all Align podcasts as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on here today. This has been an absolute joy, and we could just go on and on and on. So we may have to have you back at some point in time, but until then, I am so grateful for you to join us here today. I know that we've got a lot of great information to share, and we are in the business of continued education. So we just keep learning and keep bringing in people that we trust and kind of vibe with. So I really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. I really encourage you all to share this and other episodes with people you know and love, and help everybody get to their 100-year heart, 100-year moving body. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Healthy Heart Show.
That does it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Healthy Heart Show. Please help us get the word out by liking and subscribing to our podcast and our Facebook page, Natural Heart Doctor. Please show support for our podcast sponsor, Cardiology Coffee, your resource for organic, antioxidant-rich, mold and pesticide-free coffee shipped straight to your door. Learn more by adding @Cardiology Coffee on Instagram and visiting cardiologycoffee.com. This podcast provides materials for information and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. We encourage you to contact your physician for any of the health issues discussed here.